Old head horror fans will tell you that Tobe Hooper's original Salem's Lot miniseries that aired on CBS of all things is an all-time horror classic and that it rocked them to the core, especially if they were children when it came out. My mom is one of these people, and growing up I took all of her horror recommendations very, very seriously because she seldom pointed me in the wrong direction. I can thank my fandom of Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street to my mom because she talked up the characters of Jason Voorhees and Freddy Krueger to such a point that I was like, can we please, Mom, can we please watch one of them? And she would sit down and we would watch one of them and boom, fandom born, hooked for life. So anytime she would point me towards something from the 80s or the late 70s and she'd be like, you have to see this. This was so good. All my friends talked about this. We were so scared by this. I had to check it out. And like I said, so often I became a huge fan of whatever she pointed me towards. But the craziest thing was Salem's Lot was a thing that she's pointed to and was like, Nate, that scared me and my sisters more than anything growing up. We watched it each night, and each night we regretted it. We would just stay up in the middle of the night once my parents were asleep. We would all convene in the same room and we would just kind of bundle up and make sure that no way Barlow was going to come in and turn us into a vampire, because we all had these nightmarish images of our friends floating outside of our window with yellow cat-like eyes scratching and pawing at our windows trying to get in to convert us into undead vampires. So this woman who had always come through for me when it came to horror, she's telling me this. I'm like, yo, Salem's Lot, that must be a requisite for my horror education. I'm not going to be a bona fide horror fan if I don't see this thing. It's going to blow my socks off. And then I watch it, and it's maybe one of the biggest letdowns in my horror fandom of my entire life. I mean, I was so bored. The way she talked about it, I thought from the word go, I was going to be sitting there and just kind of like clawing into my arm, feeling my heartbeat in my throat, breaking out in a cold sweat. I mean, I watched this when I was young. And that's probably part of the problem. One, the expectations, thinking it was going to be that frightening, and that it would be that frightening to someone who was more accustomed to more modern horror fare, where things, I mean, this was like early 2000s, so this is the peak of like Saw and Hostel and post 9/11 horror, which was just the most angry, like brutal, in-your-face horror. So when those are the things you're used to watching, a more slow burn, slow progressing movie that really was a mini-series that was supposed to not offend censors of CBS and to work for advertisers of the time, it was never going to mesh with me as a kid the way my mom had really built it up. But that being said, as I got older, I was like, you know what? I love Stephen King. The Shining is my favorite book. Maybe the book Salem's Lot is better. So here it is. I've read it. I really enjoy it. I don't love it as much as The Shining book, but I would still say it's like in my top 10 Stephen King novels. And so I've always had a lot of excitement for this new one, because I was like, maybe this is the one. Maybe this will be my definitive take on Salem's Lot. This will work for me the way the original did for my mom. Whew. Not quite, but it ain't bad. Some people online are saying this thing's awful. It's not, but I do feel bad for the filmmaker. So if you don't know the background on this thing, I mean, this was announced, it feels like years ago. I've been excited about this for years. I feel like I put up a post on Instagram like 2 years ago at this point where I was like, hey, they just announced this thing. I'm so psyched. I'm going to go buy the book and read through it, and I will be ready. I'm going to rewatch the miniseries. Can't wait. Can't wait to compare the two. Hey, I did my homework. I rewatched the miniseries. I like it a lot more as an adult now. Now I can kind of appreciate the slow burn. I can appreciate that the Marston house in this story serves as this sort of monument of a seedy past, a dark history, that it's like a cavity that no one wants to acknowledge, and now that cavity is sort of corrupting the rest of the town. That all these people that live in the lot, they kind of suck even before the vampire shows up. But that when the vampire does show up, you do have seminal horror history moments like that kid floating outside and looking ghastly and ghoulish. That you do have the moment in the kitchen where the family is talking about what is going on in town right now. And next thing you know, there's just this outstretched dark fabric in the middle of the floor. And they're like, and you, the viewer, are like, and next thing you know, that fabric is starting to sort of grow and it's taking shape and it's this kind of huddled mass. And next thing you know, it's the full shape of like a 6 foot tall, long-fingered, long-clawed vampire with those yellow eyes, with these long bowed teeth that come back and meet in the center, that just looks hellish. And he's now in your kitchen, standing right in front of you, just towering over you, and he dismantles your whole entire freaking family in no time. That stuff still works. That stuff is still dope. So, coming out through that, coming out through loving the book. I'm like, what are we going to get here? Well, we're going to get the antithesis of that original series. And I don't mean that to be a complete smack in the face. This is a book that has a lot going on. It's very long. There are a lot of certain characterizations and developments that take place that kind of take time to properly explore. That's why maybe a miniseries is a more apt vehicle for this than a movie. And so what happened is the director, he had a film he was proud of, and it was 3 hours. And the studio said, no freaking way. You got to cut out like over an hour of what you have. This thing needs to move way faster. We need way more action. We need to get to that action much faster. And this needs to be way more friendly to the masses. And that's what we get with the 2024 version that is now streaming on HBO Max. So, whereas the other one was much more of a slow building tension, this one is like breakneck speed once it gets going. And whereas the other one, you really understood the motivations of the characters, who they were, why they were doing what they were doing. This one, you're kind of like, you know what? I'm having a lot of fun so long as I don't think about it. I don't really understand why this person's not responding to things more than they are. The Mark character in this adaptation, he's the one whose family is dispatched in the kitchen. He's seen all these people be killed off. He comes to this town, everybody's rude to him. He's just having nothing but hardship. And he doesn't give one single flying fart, y'all, the entire movie. This kid doesn't respond to anything. He just immediately takes to murdering off vampires and never once showing an ounce of fear or dread. It is peculiar. I mean, he's kind of dope. It's kind of fun to root for him. He's much more entertaining and easier to root for than I would say than our actual protagonist, played by the son of Bill Pullman, which I got to say, that casting feels a little bit like nepotism because I think he's one of the weak points of the movie. I think that protagonist is just protagonist and he offers nothing beyond that. It's just like, hey, this is your main character. He's the guy that grew up here. He moved out to become an author. That didn't go great, so he's coming back. He's going to write about the Marston house, and then things start going, and he's going to investigate, and he gets in over his head, just like the original. Except he doesn't really have any charisma. He hardly ever really emotes, and he's not going to do everything to ever really stand up as a hero. So instead, we get the boy, and we're rooting for the boy, and we're like, this boy may be a psychopath, and it's probably a good thing. It sounds crazy, but it's probably a good thing that everybody around him is getting turned into vampires and dying off, because he has a certain set of skills like Liam Neeson and Taken that make him a great vampire killer. And if this didn't happen, I don't know what this boy's life would have been. I kind of shudder at the thought, because he may have been a freaking psychopathic murderer. But the way things turned out, great. He gets to play to his strengths. He's going to go around and not blink in the face of death and just slay vampires. Awesome. Someone's got to do it to make this movie go. I'll root for this kid. Why not? And what I appreciate is that there is like an original spin on this adaptation. It's not just all the same beats. I mean, we do get the moments you expect, the things that always appear on the top 100 horror movie moments of all time, the stuff like the kid floating outside the window, the stuff like Barlow appearing in the kitchen. It's not as strong in this one, but it comes with its own flavor, and the scares are kind of crafted in their own way. It's not just the same shot for shot. The scare comes at you differently. And what I think is effective about this movie is it's not necessarily all jump scares, but it's all scares that are akin to a jump scare. It's a moment where you know, okay, there's going to be a blitz here at some point. The monster or the vampire in this scene is going to go at them with haste and aggression. And I'm, oh God, okay, I thought I was ready for it. Then we put it in there. That was actually quite nice. That was actually really good. You made me jump. And now I'm bleeding because my wife was holding onto my arm and she just clawed the ever-living F out of it. Good job, movie. So I do give it its props for that. And I give it props for having a really kind of cool look to it. This movie has pop, and it doesn't even always make sense. I'm kind of mixed on it, if anything, but I can appreciate that it has its own flair and taste. You could show me a still of this movie and I would immediately go, that's Salem's Lot 2024, because the lighting and color in this movie, the saturation, is something unto itself. Never were they content to go, you know what, this shot's just going to look like a real life shot. No, we need to have multiple light sources. We need to have multiple colors, and we got to take the saturation out. We got to rip that sucker off. So there are moments that really work for me. It's where like little boys are taking a shortcut through the woods, but you don't just kind of follow behind them. You don't just see like a brown path with maybe green trees or like autumn colored trees. No, I have this perspective at the bottom of the hill and the trees, the boys, they are all dark. It's complete silhouette. Suddenly there's a third silhouette that's lurking behind them. The boys are completely unaware. And the backdrop to all of this is this crazy poppy sky, this neon cotton candy, if you will, the most vibrant pink and most beautiful blue. It looks gorgeous. It looks like something Bob Ross would have done, for goodness sakes. And so moments like that, I'm like, yo, they're cooking with Salem's Lot 2024. And then other moments, you see a boy that has kind of been manipulated by a vampire friend, and he goes out into his yard at night, and it doesn't feel realistic whatsoever. It doesn't even feel artistic. Yes, there's really a ton of saturation and color going on, but to a detriment, because it just feels like a boy and a teeter-totter in his yard, but a boy and a teeter-totter on a soundstage, no lights on, and then in post we're just going to play with saturation and a lot of effects and stuff and just make like there's weird swirling green mist, and it just feels like you're not on Earth and you're not watching something that took place on Earth or could take place on Earth. It just feels kind of like something that's going to disconnect you from the movie and take you out of it. And there's a few moments like that. I mean, I think this third act really goes for it. Once this movie gets going, it gets going. It's just boom, 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 boom. Stakes doubling, tripling, quadrupling. Not just the one vampire we're used to, a whole horde, a whole army of vampires. And not just in the same old setting. We're not just content to keep this thing to the realm of the Marston house like the original. No, we have a new setting, a new arena for things to go down, and it's a whole army of freaking vampires, and that is dope, and that's the stuff that makes me smile, and that's why it's a 3 out of 5, because if you just want to watch something that can help you escape from your day-to-day and from the nonsense of the world, and you can just go, oh, cool, creature effects, a vampire looks pretty badass, which just Barlow does. I still prefer the original, but this one still looks really cool. He's kind of much more pale than he is blue. He has these really sharp features, and he has these sort of almost like thick red blood veins that kind of web up the top of his head, and they pulsate and as he attacks, and it's striking. The vampires are striking. The silhouettes of all these vampires on the rooftops, it's striking, especially with all the colored effects we talked about. So you do all of that, and you know what? I was able to escape for like a couple hours. I was able to have a lot of fun. When I think critically, I'm like, you know what? This little boy shouldn't be this fearless. He should be way more scared. He should be way more emotional and tore up about losing his family. This movie fails to provide the character arcs and the story that original miniseries does. It's not the most faithful adaptation of Stephen King's work. You can do all of those things. And you can look at certain things like, I think too much was cut out. We have breakneck speed and all that, but at what cost? You could do all of those things. And that's why I would submit to you that this isn't a great movie. But if you just need some fun Friday night fare, you just need a good fun horror movie, you don't like vampires dressed in like Victorian wear and talking with Shakespearean dialogue, you like them just going after bitches almost like 30 Days of Night, this is that type of flick. So I would say go ahead and check it out then. I would give it the recommendation. I think it's worth checking out and making your own opinion on. And I'd kind of like to hear your take down below for those that have seen the original. Which do you prefer? And I'm just going to go ahead and assume nobody here likes the Rob Lowe one the most. So those are my thoughts. 3 out of 5. I think I will definitely be watching this again. It has a lot of issues, but it's worth checking out for the design of the creatures, for the multitude of creatures, for that badass little boy who's definitely a sociopath and definitely would have went down a much darker road if there wasn't a vampire outbreak. And for the fact that this is just a fun, otherworld take on one of my favorite Stephen King stories. But other than that, I hope you hit subscribe. If you enjoyed this video, I hope you hit like, and I hope you have yourself a great day. I'm Nate from Nate Flick saying that's a wrap.